October 20th, 2011. A convoy of more than 50 vehicles tears through the outskirts of Sirte, Libya, racing toward the desert before dawn. Hidden among the trucks is a man who ruled this country for 42 years. A man who survived coups, assassinations, and international sanctions. A man who once commanded billions in oil wealth and called himself the King of Kings of Africa. Now he is fleeing in the dark without headlights, hoping the shadows hide him. They don't. How does one of the longest-serving dictators in modern history end up bleeding in a drainage pipe, pulled out by the same people he ruled for 4 decades? And what happened in those final hours that the world is still arguing about today? Muammar Gaddafi came from nothing. Born in 1942 in a desert camp near Sirte, the same city where he would die, he grew up in a poor Bedouin family with no connections, no wealth, and no obvious path to power. He joined the military, studied in Libya, then briefly in the United Kingdom. And in 1969, at just 27 years old, he led a bloodless coup against King Idris while the king was abroad receiving medical treatment. Within hours, Libya had a new ruler. He got rid of the monarchy, closed American and British military bases, nationalized the oil industry. He built his own political system, the Jamahiriya, which he claimed gave power directly to the people. In practice, it gave all power to him. Political parties were banned, free speech didn't exist, corruption ran through every level of government, as the oil wealth stayed concentrated at the top while millions of ordinary Libyans scraped by. For decades, that arrangement held. During the 1970s and 1980s, Gaddafi was known globally for financing armed groups and backing terror attacks. He was blamed for the 1988 bombing of Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland. 270 people dead. International sanctions followed. Libya became isolated. Yet Gaddafi survived it all. By the 2000s, he was even rehabilitating his image, giving up weapons programs, reopening ties with Western nations, shaking hands with Tony Blair and Silvio Berlusconi. He believed he had finally secured his position. He was wrong. In February 2011, the Arab Spring reached Libya. In Benghazi, the country's second-largest city, protests began on February 15th when families of political prisoners gathered outside a police station demanding the release of a human rights lawyer named Fatih Terbil. By February 17th, known as the Day of Rage, thousands filled the streets across Benghazi, Baida, Tobruk, and Derna. They were angry about 40 years of dictatorship, poverty, and repression. Gaddafi's response was immediate. Security forces opened fire. Hospital reports confirmed over 230 people killed in the first 4 days. Many were shot in the chest and head. Live ammunition fired into unarmed crowds. His son, Saif al-Islam, appeared on state television warning that rivers of blood would flow if the protests didn't stop. The crackdown didn't stop the uprising. It accelerated it, and military units began defecting. In Benghazi, the 36th Brigade turned against the regime and helped rebels seize control of the city. Police stations were overrun. Weapons were looted. By February 24th, most of eastern Libya had slipped from Gaddafi's hands entirely. Some of his own Air Force pilots refused to bomb cities and flew their planes to Malta to seek asylum instead. The man who had ruled for 42 years was losing his country in days. On March 17, 2011, the United Nations Security Council passed Resolution 1973 authorizing all necessary measures to protect Libyan civilians, including a no-fly zone. 2 days later, airstrikes began. Over 110 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from American and British warships in the Mediterranean. French fighter jets destroyed tanks advancing toward Benghazi. Our NATO took full command on March 23rd under Operation Unified Protector. Gaddafi's military infrastructure began to collapse. His MiG-23 fighters, Sukhoi bombers, and air defense systems were destroyed one by one. Tanks and armored vehicles were wiped out near Misrata and Zintan. NATO warships enforced an arms embargo along the coastline. On state television, Gaddafi continued to appear, calling the rebels rats and traitors, accusing NATO of trying to colonize Libya, promising to cleanse the country street by street. He was running out of streets. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, subscribe now and hit the bell. Don't let history bury them a second time. By August 2011, rebel forces backed by NATO airstrikes pushed into Tripoli. The capital fell within days. Gaddafi vanished. His compound was overrun, and his family members fled to Algeria and Niger. His 42-year grip on power dissolved in 72 hours. But Gaddafi himself was still out there. Intelligence reports tracked him to Sirte, his birthplace and one of his last remaining strongholds. Rebel forces surrounded the city in September. The siege lasted weeks. NATO drones circled overhead continuously. Inside the city, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Food and medicine ran out, water supplies were cut, electricity failed. Buildings were reduced to rubble by constant shelling. Loyalist fighters dug in and refused to surrender. Gaddafi moved constantly, rarely sleeping in the same location twice. His inner circle had shrunk to a handful of trusted guards and senior officers. Other members of his government had already escaped or been captured. Every exit route out of Sirte was blocked. Roads were watched. Convoys heading out were attacked or turned back. By October 19th, it was over. Gaddafi made the decision to try to escape. The plan was to form a convoy of more than 50 vehicles, pickup trucks and SUVs, many fitted with mounted machine guns. The convoy would leave under cover of darkness, travel without headlights to avoid drone detection, reach the desert outskirts of Sirte, then head southwest towards Saba and from there attempt to cross into Niger or Algeria. Around 8 in the evening, they moved out. What Gaddafi didn't know was that American and French intelligence had been monitoring Sirte for weeks. NATO surveillance drones had been watching for exactly this kind of movement. That same night, a US MQ-1 Predator drone picked up heat signatures showing a convoy forming and moving out of the city. They tracked it through the dark. In the early morning hours of October 20th, as the convoy reached the western outskirts of Sirte, the Predator launched a Hellfire missile directly at the lead vehicle. The front of the convoy stopped dead. Minutes later, French Mirage jets dropped laser-guided bombs on the rear. Both ends of the convoy exploded in flames simultaneously. The vehicles in the middle were trapped. Drivers crashed trying to escape. Dozens of loyalist fighters died on the spot. Survivors ran. Gaddafi, his son Mutassim, security chief Mansour Dao, and a small group of others fled on foot into the surrounding area, covered in dust and blood, stumbling through debris. They found a large concrete drainage pipe beneath the road, all hidden by brush, about 4 feet across, just wide enough to crawl into. They hid inside and waited. Rebel fighters from Misrata had been following the convoy's path for days. They arrived at the strike site shortly after the attack and began searching systematically. Damaged vehicles, nearby buildings, the surrounding ground. They found bloodstains, then footprints, then the pipe entrance. They threw in a grenade first, then they moved in to look. Gaddafi was crouched inside, wearing brown pants and a bloodstained shirt, hair matted, face covered in blood and dirt. Injuries to his left arm, back, and right leg from the blast. He stumbled when they pulled him out into the sunlight, barely able to stand. The man who had ruled Libya for 42 years could not hold himself upright. What happened next was chaotic and violent. Our news of the capture spread instantly over radios and phones. More and more fighters converged on the location. Gaddafi was placed in the back of a pickup truck. As the truck moved slowly through narrow roads packed with armed men, he was beaten. Fists, sticks, gun butts. Multiple videos captured the scene and were shared around the world within hours. The exact moment of his death is still disputed. Medical reports confirmed he was shot in the head and abdomen. Some accounts say he was shot during a struggle in the truck. Others believe a fighter executed him deliberately. There was no trial, no announcement, no confirmed identity of who fired the fatal shot. By the time the truck reached an NTC checkpoint on the outskirts of Sirte, Muammar Gaddafi was dead. Doctors later confirmed the time of death as approximately 1 in the afternoon on October 20th, 2011. He was 69 years old. His body was taken to Misrata, the city that had suffered some of the worst bombardment of the war. For 3 days, it was kept inside a refrigerated meat locker in a local market. Hundreds lined up to see it. On October 23rd, the NTC declared the end of the civil war. On October 25th, Gaddafi was buried in a remote desert location somewhere in western Libya. The exact burial site has never been made public. He had spent 42 years making himself impossible to remove. He survived sanctions, assassination attempts, and a United States airstrike on his compound in 1986. He watched other dictators fall and believed he was different. Believed his system was stronger. Believed the Libyan people, in the end, would not turn against him. He was found in a drainage pipe. The man who called himself the King of Kings of Africa died in a concrete tunnel beneath a road, pulled out into the sun by the people he had ruled since they were children. That is the ending 42 years of absolute power brought him. If this story moved you, subscribe now and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this one, and we are just getting started.